and welcome to the Power to Drive here in Munich. Today we are speaking with Albina Iljasov. She is head of Europe at XCharge, a company at the forefront of EV infrastructure and energy management solutions. And as the EV ecosystem in Europe grows and the grid challenges mount, XCharge aims to deliver more than just kilowatts. Albina, thank you so much for speaking to us here. Albina, XCharge operates at the intersection of EV infrastructure and energy management solutions. And how are you positioning the company in Europe and in an increasingly grid-sensitive landscape?
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for having us here. Our mission is to create an energy ecosystem for the global energy transition. So we started with DC and ultra-fast charging, but we are evolving to fast charging with integrated battery storage, enabling mission like microgrid. So features like battery back to the grid and enabling providers as well as charge point operators to save the grid or not to stress out the grid too much by features like this.
And what does that mean in terms of bidirectional charging, V2G? How are you adapting hardware? I mean, you mentioned obviously if you're feeding back into the grid, it needs to be bidirectional, but how are you adapting the hardware and how are you looking at what customers need and feed that into your hardware and your software solutions?
Yes, so V2G, so a vehicle back to the grid in DC is not really a topic. What we do is battery back to the grid, because since we already have a battery integrated, what we do, we enable for, with a product like Net Zero Series, we take the energy during low pricing, charge up the battery, and then when a vehicle comes, and for example, the energy prices are higher, the charger still can provide fast charging or ultra fast charging up to 210 kilowatts output, while only getting 60 kilowatt from the grid. In a lot of locations, it means you don't have to do the grid extension because, for example, you cannot. It's way too expensive, or for many other reasons. Maybe it's just not lucrative enough to do so. So we are enabling our partners in logistic companies or gas stations in their first steps into electrification, where they are saying, okay, we have to electrify, we need to provide this opportunity to our customers. How do we do this without, putting a massive trafo station of 3 megawatts output? We can put a Net Zero Series, take only 60 kilowatt from the grid and still provide fast charging. And at the same time, the battery back to the grid option, as you know, regulatorily, it's a little bit more complicated. Technically, it's actually quite possible. You can also feed back to the grid, or what we say, maybe not directly to the grid, but to a different location, like a kiosk or maybe an office building. We, for example, power up our AC in the office back from the Net Zero Series.
And you just mentioned regulatory framework and the patchwork that is still, especially in Europe, that we see. Is battery storage combined with an EV charger a way to kind of take that hurdle, or are there just different hurdles that you have to take?
Well, it's still undefined, I want to say. So since we cover all of Europe, we notice that each country comes up with new regulations on their own. Italy, for example, has their own thing. Sweden comes up with a new thing. I'm sure Germany will follow just as fast with something very complex. Let's see. But because of that, we need to make sure to get various certifications at the same time, which makes it really hard, and also just delays a lot of projects, which is very unfortunate. So we do hope eventually we will have sort of a roof regulation, especially for chargers and battery storage together.
But is battery storage combined with an EV charger a way to kind of around some of that patchwork, or you say, no, sorry, you have to jump through exactly the same hoops?
I think a lot of countries are still not sure about this. So we're kind of waiting at the moment. There are a few new regulations, but so we have to cover everything for the fast chargers, but at the same time cover everything for the battery storage. But we hope it will be eventually sort of a roof over our heads to make it easier.
Okay, and obviously there's another sector in EV or electric mobility that's evolving, which is the commercial vehicle sector. How is XCharge adapting its roadmap to kind of service that sector?
Yes, so we already launched a 400 kilowatt charger with liquid cooled cables, enabling really 500 amps continuous charging, especially for trucks and or buses and so on. We have various projects. We have one, for example, in northern part of Italy. It's a massive bus depot where we have with our C7 with liquid cooling. There is the products that we already have, but then we have, of course, the Net Zero series for locations where the grid cannot be extended at this time. For example, some projects with logistic companies that we have, where they're getting the first trucks, and they're trying it out before they electrify the entire fleet. So it's a very good, so to say, starting point. And of course, we work very closely with all of our customers and partners. Go to a lot of events, of course, just to listen. Okay, what's happening? What are their demands? What will be needed in terms of output power? Connectivity and so on. For buses, for example, we also implemented the VDV 261, which enables the bus preconditioning. So the communication between bus and charger to enable smoother, so to say, fleet operation.
Okay, well, you said you listen to your customers, so what's next for XCharge?
Well, the next step at XCharge is to bring more value chain to XCharge. For example, the Net Zero series, as you see, the battery pack itself is not from us directly, so we do the charging and combine it with the battery storage, but the next step is it's going to be ours. So we actually already launched it in the US. It's called the GridLink. We're bringing it to Europe next year, so it's going to be exciting. So next year, I hope you come and see it. And it means that we're bringing more and more components, especially critical components, as well as extending the product portfolio into helping, building this ecosystem of energy transition. So not only charging, but what comes with it. PV, for example, PV integration, battery back to the grid. Further steps in user experience and user interaction to make cable management easier, and so on and so on. So there's a whole lot of things are coming up next year as well.
Albina, thank you so much for speaking to us. That was very interesting, lots to come, and we look forward to seeing your European strategy unfold.
Yeah, thank you very much as well. Thanks.